Now, the second half of this question related to discrimination or the class system. Second half of question is it birth determines the varnas or the profession? Okay. So this is again another great question, and there are various arguments over it. Even for those who are to some extent study the shastras, there is a lot of twisting statements that come out. But what we have to remember is it is very clear. I said this. It is very clear that the varnas and ashramas is what defines the duties for those who are in the karma yoga. Okay, so dvenishta maya prokta. That's what Bhagavan said, right? Jnana yogena, jnana yoga for the realized ones and those who are purification of the mind, and karma yoga for the yoginam. So for those others, everybody else who has not realized that attained that purification of mind, for them it is karma yoga. That's what Bhagavan said. So those who are in that second group, for them it is clear the duties are determined by the varnas and the ashramas. You can call profession that duty as a profession in today's context, but duty is clearly specified in the shastras. But what one does and does not determine the varna in the birth, it may in the future birth. Okay, just because I started doing puja in a temple, I will not become a Brahmana if I am born as a Kshatriya or a Vaishya or a Shudra. Okay, just because I learned Purusha Sukta, I will not become a Brahmana. Similarly, a Brahmana doing another job does not make him a Kshatriya or a Vaishya or others. If one is born as a Kshatriya, he is a Kshatriya for a life. There is no other way. This is again, Shastras clearly says this. Anushasana, for example, in Mahabharata says clearly that even a Brahmana that is destitute of knowledge is Devata, is equal to Devata, and is high instrument for cleansing the others. So, and also the same Anushasana Parma says that Brahmana by birth alone becomes an object of adoration to all the creatures. And also the same Parva in Mahabharata says the Kshatriya of even great persons, he boasts Brahmana children that are still in mother's wombs. So all this is saying that even what one does, how one conducts, that irrelevant. They are still adorable. They are still equal to devatas and things like that. Okay, Kshatriya of great merit, he is doing following his dharma, he is doing a lot of sacrifice and things like that. Still boasts to a Brahmana who is still in the womb of his mother. Okay, he's not gone through even Upanayana Samskara and learned God through his Gayatri Upadesha. Right? Such a person is worshipable by a Kshatriya. That's what the Mahabharata here says. And also we see all this saying, irrespective of the conduct, qualities, duties performed by one is concerned as a Brahmana purely because of his birth. And also we see in the Smritis, for example, Manusmriti clearly says that in the 8th year after conception, one should perform it. Upanayana for Brahmana, 8th, 11th for Kshatriya, and 12th for Vaishya, and so on. So here again, if you are saying that birth is not relevant to become a Brahmana, how are we saying that 8th year one should perform Upanayana for a Brahmana, 12th, 11th for Kshatriya? Okay, at that age, 8th year, his conduct, his profession, you cannot determine whether he's a Kshatriya or a Brahmana or a Shudra or whatever. You can only determine through his birth. That's what birth was with one. So that's why it is important. And again, now some will argue that scriptures say that both birth is important, birth is not important, but professional qualities are. Again, they say that Shastra, they also quote, some people quote, for example, shlokas like Janmana, Jayate, Shudra, and things like that. And there are also many say that Vishwamitra was born as a Kshatriya and he became a Brahmana in the same birth. And also they quote Yudhishthira's response, for example, in the Vanaparva, in response to Yaksha, where Yaksha asks that by what, whether it is by birth or behavior or study or learning, a person become a Brahmana. And to that, Yudhishthira answers that it is neither birth nor study nor learning. It is the cause that is the cause of the Brahmanhood. Without doubt, it is the behavior that constitutes. Okay, if one's behavior should be always well guarded, especially by a Brahmana. That's what Yudhishthira says. So people quote these kind of things to say that birth is not important. Again, from the outset, all this looks like a very good valid argument. Let's take the first example, Janmana Jayate Shudra. That's quoted. That means all are born as Shudras. Okay. So now the statement clearly says that on its own, it clearly says that everybody is Shudras. But that shloka, that statement is coming in the Puranas while it is explaining about the samskaras, what one has to go through as a samskaras in their life. So the entire shloka is not just saying that Janmana Jayate Shudra, samskara dvija uchyate. So by samskaras, one becomes a dvija. So that means by Upanayana and all the other samskaras one goes through, they become dvija through that. So if you just take a half of the shloka or a quarter of the shloka, it gives a completely different meaning without any context. Then the second thing people mention is Vishwamitra, right? So Vishwamitra, again, there is a huge story about how Vishwamitra's story, and that's why he became a Brahmana is determined, that is through the prarabdha, and we know the stories many times. We heard about Vishwamitra and Parashurama, the births. So there is also clear references saying that one born in other varna cannot become a Brahmana or things like that. For example, Matanga tried to become a Brahmana, and we see that story in Mahabharata. And Sri Rama in Valmiki Ramayana, we see that in the Uttarakhanda, where Rama goes and kills a Shudra who is doing tapasya or Shambhuka. He was killed by Rama because he was doing tapasya and trying to live like a Brahmana's life. So it is not possible. It is not all. And then the last thing is Yudhishthira's statement, right? Yudhishthira again there implying or explaining the conduct and behavior importance for a Brahmana. He was not just talking about the birth and the importance of birth. While giving importance to that conduct of a Brahmana, what Yudhishthira says that, again, the second half of the statement is normally ignored in this instance, where Yudhishthira clearly says one's behavior should always be well guarded, especially a Brahmana. Okay, so that's why to stress that point that behavior of a Brahmana is important, Yudhishthira says that nothing else is important for a Brahmana. Whether it is birth or what his learning or anything is important, his behavior is important, because Yudhishthira was stressing on that. This is like Krishna saying Karma Yoga is superior to Jnana Yoga. In the next chapter we see this. Okay, where Krishna says Karma Yoga is superior to Jnana Yoga, simply to highlight the importance of the Karma Yoga for people like Arjuna, people like us. So that's why Krishna says that Karma Yoga is superior. But he is not saying that actually Karma Yoga is superior, because we already looked at many times that Jnana Yoga is the one that is the moksha, right? So to prize something, you have to compare it to something even superior. Okay, so that's what Yudhishthira is doing, saying that behavior in Brahmana's case is important. So to conclude this statement, birth is very important. Varnas in this life, birth determines the Varnas. Not one that does, birth determines. What one does determines what happens in the future births. So whether Brahmana continues to be born in a Brahmana family or becomes a worm or a Shudra or whatever, Chandala, it depends. And similarly, Shudra in this birth born, next one becomes a Kshatriya, Vaishya or a Brahmana, depends on his conduct in this birth. So those who are unrealized, for them, again, this Karma Yoga, this is very important. Duties are assigned based on that.